It is now in order to consider amendments to H.R. 276. I recognize myself for the purpose of offering my amendment in the nature of a substitute designated Westerman 11 A&S. Without objection, the amendment is considered read and open to amendment at any point. Now, I urge my colleagues to support the A&S, which makes a small technical change to the short title of the bill. This A&S ensures that we recognize a name that honors American greatness by codifying a portion of Executive Order 14172, permanently renaming the area formerly known as the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. I would like to thank Representative Green from Georgia for her work on this legislation. And I will say this is a simple bill. It does a simple thing, but I think it does carry a big message, and I think it's why President Trump did this on day one, when his agenda is to put America first, and he did that symbolically and literally by saying he's gonna rename the Gulf of Mexico, which he has that authority to do, and we have the authority to codify that into a law. I think to lay the groundwork to say America is going to be first, and it's going to be America First policy in the legislation that we consider and hopefully move out of this committee in a bipartisan manner for the future of our country. Again, I urge support of this, and I yield back. Is there further discussion on the amendment? There's no further discussion on the amendment. It is now in order to consider amendments to the A&S to H.R. 276. I recognize Ranking Member Huffman for the purpose of offering an amendment designated Huffman number 3. Without objection, the amendment is considered read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If Republicans on this committee are serious about renaming the Gulf of Mexico, we should at least be honest about what is driving all this. My amendment proposes that rather than calling it the Gulf of America, we acknowledge what this bill truly represents, which is a departure from science, history, and common sense. We should call it the Gulf of Ignorance. Now, I acknowledge that there could be a robust debate about other words that one could put in place of ignorance, and I would accept friendly amendments from folks who might have a case to be made that it should be the Gulf of Incompetence, maybe the Gulf of Arrogance, delusion, bootlicking sycophancy, strong case to be made that that would be appropriate, or maybe the Gulf of alienating our allies and neighbors. But the bottom line is, I agree with the majority of Americans who've been polled on this. The Gulf of Mexico doesn't need a different name. But if the majority wants to spend the committee's precious time and resources on symbolic gestures to glorify President Trump, then it's important that we also recognize all the burning priorities that you're choosing to ignore by wasting time on this. You know, we could be talking about ways to save lives by preventing catastrophic wildfires, or collecting and protecting climate and weather data to save communities from extreme storms, or restoring public access to National Park Service websites that Republicans are frantically trying to cancel because they talk about things like history and science and the environment. There is no shortage of things that people need us to do in this committee, that they want us to do, and you are choosing to play naming games. I have a hard time believing most people in the Gulf of Mexico who have endured devastating hurricanes and extreme weather events see this as a good use of Congress's time, when we could be spending our time helping communities prepare for rising sea levels or the next natural disaster. In fact, an overwhelming number of Americans do not support renaming the Gulf. As I said, according to some credible polling, the Gulf is one of the most ecologically and economically vital regions in the Western Hemisphere, not just for the United States, but for a lot of other countries. It is home to productive fisheries, endangered species like the Rice's whale, unique deep-sea coral reefs and ecosystems. Its resources include resources that fuel industries, provide jobs, sustain coastal communities, and those real challenges, protecting ecosystems, building resilience, preparing for the future, deserve a seriousness. They deserve our serious attention, not political theater and a vanity project in order to please Donald Trump. If we want to rename the Gulf, let's at least be honest about what that says, that we're choosing to ignore science, history, and the pressing needs of coastal communities and the people we serve. That's why I propose an amendment to call it the Gulf of Ignorance, if that's really the way Republicans want to move forward. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Mr. LaMalfa, you're recognized.
Maybe amend it to the Gulf of Hyperbole, the Gulf of Hysteria. Tick-tock, tick-tock, we're losing committee time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the amendment? I recognize myself. I don't think anybody will be surprised to know that I oppose this amendment. This amendment would actually rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Ignorance, which is, to me, a very demeaning name. I don't know if that's meant to demean the region, the president, the country, or the people that work in the Gulf and do a lot of good for our country. So obviously, oppose the amendment. It's just one in a series of amendments that we will consider today that do nothing to improve the legislation before us. I urge all my colleagues to oppose the amendment, and I yield back. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If there's no further discussion on the amendment, the question is on the amendment offered by Ranking Member Huffman, designated Huffman number 3. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not adopted.
I'll take the loss.
I recognize Ranking Member Huffman for the purpose of offering an amendment designated Huffman number 4.
Mr. Chair, reserve a point of order on Huffman 4.